Hi everyone and welcome back to Sprinkle with Paper. Today I'm going to be sharing how you can turn any black and white clip art into a multicolored design over in Cricut Design Space. When searching for my design, I'm going to search for a coloring sheet. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm basically going to be coloring in all the different portions of the image over in Cricut Design Space with different colors. And so if I search for a coloring sheet, that's going to give me a nice clean image with nice lines. And just as a reminder, this is something that you can only use for personal use. So these are all copyrighted images, and if you try to sell something like this on Etsy or your own personal website, you could get in trouble with an infringement lawsuit. And if you want to create something with a character, say from Super Mario or any type of Disney character, those are things that you could do just for personal use, which is great, but just remember you can't sell them. Now, once I decide on an image, I'm just going to right-click on it and I'm going to save it onto my computer. But as you can see here, it's trying to save it as a web page, which is not going to work in Cricut Design Space. So instead, I'm just going to take a screenshot and then I'm going to crop it and then I'll save it onto my computer. So now it was just saved as a PNG file. Now let's just open up a new project in Cricut Design Space and then click on Uploads and then either drag and drop or locate the image on your computer. And then the image type we're going to be selecting as simple because this is just a black and white single layer image. We only need to select simple. The next thing we need to do to prepare our design is we just need to go in and we need to select our little magic wand tool, and we're going to delete everything except for the outline of our design. Be sure to also zoom in to make sure that you're getting all of the little intricate parts too. So up here where the eyes are, I just need to zoom in to make sure that I get everything. And then before hitting continue, we can also preview the image just to ensure that we've deleted everything except the outline. Now just select Cut Image and then upload your design to your Cricut project page. So now that we have our image back onto our project page, I'm just going to create a different layer for every color. And I believe that I'm going to be using 7 different colors, so I'm just going to duplicate the Super Mario 6 times. So now that we have our 7 images, we're just going to work on each layer one at a time. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create our base. And that means that we want to have one image that's fully solid. So to do this, we're just going to click on Contours. And then we're going to select Hide All Contours down at the bottom. And this is going to give us that solid base. Next, I'm going to move on to the brown shoes. So again, I'm just going to select Contour, and then I'm going to select Hide All Contour. And then this time, I'm just going to select all of the shoe pieces. And then once I've selected all of the pieces of the shoes, I'm then just going to hide that solid background. And then I will only be left with the shoes. Now I'm just going to go up to colors and I'm going to change the shoes to brown, and then I'm going to layer them onto the base of my Super Mario. Next, I'm going to move on to all of the blue pieces of my design. So I'm just going to move this layer of the Super Mario down to the bottom left-hand corner. And I'm doing this only so I can see it once that contour box pops up. I want to be able to see exactly what I'm contouring. So now that I have the contour box up, I'm just going to again select Hide All Contour. And then I'll just go back in and deselect all of the blue pieces. So that's going to be the overalls and then also his eyes. So now that I have all the blue pieces selected, I then am just going to hide the background layer. And then I'm going to change all of the pieces to blue, and then I'm going to layer it over back onto the background layer. Next, I'm going to select all of the red pieces, and that includes the shirt, the hat, and then his tongue. And then I will change the color to red, and then I'm going to move on to the white pieces. And for the white, that's going to include his hand, the M on his hat, and then also his eyes and teeth. And then I'm going to move on to the little buttons, which are going to be yellow. And now before I move on to this last layer, I'm just going to duplicate this outline 2 more times just in case I miss something. It will just be easier to have these off to the side in case I need them. So from here, I'm just going to select all the pieces of his face, and then I'm going to change the color to kind of like a skin color, at least like the Mario skin color. And then I'm just going to go through and make sure that I'm not missing any colors and that everything is layered correctly. And so when doing that, it will make it really obvious if something is missing, which I can see right here. We are missing a portion of Mario's eye, which is just a black dot. So luckily I have these 2 designs here to the side. So I'm just going to grab one of those, go down to contour, and then I'm going to select that circle of his eye. And then I'm just going to change that to black. And then I'll layer it onto the Mario. And as you can see, I'm just using that layering tool to place this black dot in the correct layer. So right now it has it as the top layer and I need to send it backwards. So if I just click send backwards, I'll just click that a couple times until it is where it's supposed to be. So now that my design is complete, I'm just going to select all of the layers and then I'm going to make it larger. And from here, you can see that we have the perfect Super Mario. And if you look over on the right-hand side, you'll see all the individual layers. And if we go up and click on Make It, you'll see that each of the colors is on its own cutting mat, and the colors are all in the right order. So I'll be able to layer these once they're all cut. So now that I have my multi-layered Super Mario, I'm now just going to move on to the rest of my design. So really quick, I'm just going to make one of those green tunnels that Super Mario either goes down or jumps out of, and I'm going to make gold coins. So to make the tunnel, I'm just going to click on Shapes, select the square with the round edges, and then I'm going to unlock the shape up at the top where you can adjust the sizing. And then I'm first going to make the bottom portion of the tunnel. And then once I'm happy with that, I'm just going to duplicate it. And then I'm going to create the top portion. And then once I'm happy with the shape of the tunnel as a whole, I'm going to highlight both of the shapes and I'm going to use the offset feature to create a base layer. If you're not familiar with the offset feature, I'll link a video down in the description where I explain it in more detail. From here, I'm just going to adjust the size of the bottom green shape so there's a gap between the top and the bottom, and that's going to give it a little bit of a shadow effect. Now the last element of this design is just going to be the gold coin. So again, I'm just going to click on Shapes and I'm going to select the circle. And then once I have the circle, I'll just go back and click on Shapes one more time and I'm going to select the square. So now I'm just going to unlock the square, basically so I could just make it into a rectangle, and I'm going to place it onto the circle. And then I'm going to use the slice feature to cut that rectangle out of the circle. And now I'm going to be left with the gold coin shape. Now I'll just double check the size of my design, and then I'm going to click Make It. And now since I'm going to be using an HTV, which is also known as heat transfer vinyl or iron-on, I need to make sure that I mirror each of these individual designs. So I need to go down to each color mat and make sure that everything is mirrored. So when I go to cut, it's going to cut properly for my iron-on. The supplies I'll be using today are this shirt that I picked up from Target. It was only $5 in the little boy section. And then I'm going to be using my Cricut mat, some masking tape, weeding tool, measuring tape, and then my heat press, and then a whole bunch of different colors of everyday iron-on. So I'm going to be using yellow. I picked up this variety pack of different neutrals. And then I also found this variety pack of the red, white, and black. And then I have blue. And then also I'm using this neutral color. I believe it's called Parchment. And this one was kind of hard to find, but I did end up finding it on Amazon. After going to Hobby Lobby, Michael's, and Joann's, I couldn't find it, but I did find it on Amazon. So I'll make sure that I link it down in the description. So the first thing I do before even starting a project in Cricut Design Space is I make sure that I measure my shirt. And I just mean like I measure the width and the length of where I want my design to go on my shirt. So when I'm working with a child shirt, I always make sure that I start the design at least 2 inches down from the collar. And typically with a child shirt, I try to take up as much space as possible with the design. So now that we have the design created and we know the measurements for our design, it's time to start cutting everything out. The material I'll be using today is an everyday iron-on, and the heating instructions are normally on the packaging, and if they're not, that's no big deal. You could just look them up on Cricut's website so you know how to set your heat press. So you know the temperature, you'll know how long to keep the heat press on, and whether or not you're supposed to peel back the transfer sheet when it's cool or when it's warm. So if you don't feel like going through the hassle of looking up the instructions if they're not on the packaging, I actually made a Cricut cheat sheet, and there you'll find all the instructions for most of the different types of iron-on. And just a quick tip, if you find that your mats are losing its stickiness and you haven't had a chance to clean them, you can just use masking tape along the edges to secure your HTV down to your mat. Now I'll just cut out the rest of my colors, and then I'll start weeding out all of these pieces. Now that I have all my pieces weeded, one thing that I like to do when I'm working with so many different layers is I like to layer everything together before I iron it onto my shirt. And the reason I do this is because it does matter which order I iron all of these individual pieces on. So I do this just to ensure that I'm not making any mistakes. Now I'll just set my heat press. I'm going to set the temperature to 390 since I'll be using an everyday iron-on, and I'm going to set the time to 30 seconds. And since I'll also be ironing on all of these little gold coins along the sleeves, I'm going to heat up my Cricut Easy Press Mini because I think this might also be helpful. Once the heat press is ready, I'm just going to prepare my shirt by using the heat press on it to warm it up for about 5 seconds. And now I'll start ironing on all my individual pieces. So this does take a little bit of time because there are so many different layers. So I am going to speed it up just a little bit, but I just want to point out a few things. So whether you're using a heat press, the heat press mini, or your iron, make sure that you always have your vinyl or your iron-on covered with a transfer sheet, because if you don't, it's going to ruin the vinyl. It can't get that hot. And if you have a Teflon sheet or even parchment paper, you can use that to protect your iron-on as well. But I just wanted to show you that you don't need those extra things as long as you're really careful and you make sure that everything is covered with one of the plastic transfer sheets. Once everything is ironed on to the front of the shirt, I'm just going to flip it upside down, and I'm going to use the heat press along the back and down the sides of the arms to ensure that my iron-on is nice and secure. Now I'll just remove the transfer sheet off of all of the gold coins. And now our shirt is complete. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions about anything that I discussed in today's video, please leave them down in the comments below. Thank you again for watching, and until next time, happy crafting.